Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Seem to be having everyone here. Tamara, would you please like to start?
Yes, thank you, Shiloh. Welcome to the Compliance and Improvement Monitoring, also known as CIM orientation. My name's Tammy McMillan, and Jacqueline Stewart and I will be your facilitators for today's session. We're also joined by Shiloh Duncan Besserell, Assistant Director of the Special Education Division, Donna DiMartini and James Johnson, Administrators of the Targeted Tier Monitoring Units, and Stephen Rogers from the Data Unit. Just a few announcements this afternoon before we get started. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted to the Padlet for you to review as needed. We will be using the Q&A today as the chat has been disabled. This will allow us to review your questions easier. Lastly, all participants are muted and we will be unable to unmute you. So please make sure you use the Q&A for your questions. In today's session, we'll briefly go over the following: targeted monitoring in general in the CIM process, understanding the annual determination letter, targeted tier selection criteria, and data table examples. We'll be going over the timeline and due dates of the CIM. We'll review steps 1 through 4. We'll give you some insight on progress reporting and how that's done, how to update your CIM plan, where to find technical assistance, what your next steps might be, and we'll have time for any questions. Here's the staff of the FMTA Unit 2, led by Donna DiMartini. And this is Unit 3 and their administrator, James Johnson. At this time, I'd like to welcome Shiloh Duncan Besserell to present the next portion of our webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Monday afternoon. We really appreciate the time that you're taking to walk through this process, to learn more about the process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the conceptualization of our monitoring system, the changes. If you've been around a while, you've known that our monitoring system has gone through quite a bit of changes. And if you've been around previously, you'll know our monitoring used to be pretty uniform across districts. If you were in one type of monitoring, you received the same kind of monitoring no matter your level or intensity of need. That's what's really changing about our monitoring system. We're really building out the system to be more responsive to the individual needs of LEAs. What that means is that districts who are in targeted will be provided support and assistance, but their engagement might be just a little bit more independent than districts who are in our intensive level of need. And so we've really created a system that allows districts to walk through the monitoring at their own pace based on their own needs. And so this is going to feel really unique to your LEA and where you all sit inside of our system. However, I do want to note that all of our resources are always available to you at whatever level you need. If your district is a targeted level 1 but needs more, we're here to provide that for you. And we will be walking through all of the processes and items that are going to be required through our monitoring system over the next year. Next slide, please. So what is this monitoring process? So you may have participated in the CIM process last year. You may have participated in the CIM process or you may have heard of it, or you may have never heard of it. So let's walk through what it is so you all can understand a little bit more about the processes and systems we're going to be talking about today. So first, step 1. Let me just start with what the process is. It's a 3-year process, and over 3 years, you're going to be building a plan and implementing that plan. We wanted to give space for LEAs to implement. And if you've been around our monitoring system a little while, you know we used to say every year, build a plan, create a plan. I've heard it called Plandemic and Planami. As a sort of a play on a tsunami. And so we wanted to end that sort of cycle and think through how can we support LEAs in developing a plan, identifying issues and developing a plan, but also in the implementation of that plan, giving districts space to implement those ideas those high leverage activities to create improvement for LEAs. So LEAs go through this 3-year process. The first year has 3 steps. Step 1 is all about identifying the problem. So in your annual determination letter, which we provided to you, it identified some data, a small amount of data. And we're going to work with you to dig deeper into your compliance and your performance data to identify what is the issues that are occurring in your LEA. Where are they occurring? What types of students are experiencing lack of improvement or lack of positive outcomes? And then we're going to ask you to go to step 2, which is, why is this happening? Why are we experiencing these issues in the LEA? What is the cause of them? And then we will want to develop an issue or a plan to address those issues. So that's step 3, developing a plan. So over the next 8 months or so, you all will be walking through this process, step 1, step 2, and step 3. So by November of this year, 2023, you will have a plan. And then starting in year 2, you will work in step 4, which is the implementation of that plan. And what we will be monitoring and supporting is how that implementation is going. You'll review local data. You'll provide us updates. We'll review your data. And so we'll be working with you to make sure that those plans are implemented. Keep in mind, if you are a district that is targeted level 1 or level 2, you will be working through this process mostly independently at your own pace as you walk through it. And you'll be also implementing and we'll be reviewing your data annually. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. Next slide, please. So districts are going to be going through one of two processes this year. Either they're just starting the CIM, so they're just beginning the process, and we'll talk about all the steps that go into that. So don't get too nervous yet and want to know all the details. I can see many of the questions coming in are asking some of those details. We will get to those and we will try and answer all of your questions. But you will be going through steps 1, 2, and 3. What is happening? Why is this happening? And how can we address it? If you completed a CIM last year, you will be working on that implementation part. So you'll be working to implement your plan and make sure that it is meeting the needs of your LEA and your students. You may be taking data that you look at this year that we provide you, and you may be making adjustments to that plan to make it more responsive to the needs of your LEA. And overall, you're going to be working through that process this entire year. So might be in one of two of these processes. Next slide, please. So I do want to talk a little bit about progress reporting, which is districts who completed a CIM last year. So if you had a CIM last year and you now find yourself in targeted, there will be due dates where you will be developing progress reports. And so for LEAs who are identified as significantly disproportionate, July 10th is your due date for your CSACE report. That's your CCEIS report. And for LEAs who are identified as intensive and targeted level 2, they'll be also providing progress reports. That progress report will be due July 14th. Don't worry, I do understand that those dates are in the summer and some districts are off in the summer. Some staff are not working in the summer. We completely understand. We hope that districts will be able to complete that before the due date. But if they cannot, we will continue to work with you to make sure that you're able to meet the requirements. The most important thing that we want you to remember is this is about improvement and implementing your improvement plan. So we're going to work with you to make sure that you can meet the needs of the students and meet our reporting requirements. Even if that means that maybe your report comes in a little bit late, we will work with you on that. Next slide, please. This is all I had to say. And then we will continue to answer your questions as they come along. We're going to be talking a little bit more about data. But I do want to introduce my colleague, Jacqueline Stewart. She's going to be walking through your annual determination letter today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here making time with us today. So let's take some time to talk about the annual determination letter. The annual determination letter went out last Monday, about a week ago on March 20th. You should have received it by now. And the annual determination letter includes a lot of information. It includes information specifically about your LEA's annual determination. based off of lag year data. In the annual determination letter, you will also find your monitoring tier and level. So all LEAs here with us right now are in the targeted tier, and you are either level 1 or level 2 for this current cycle. There will also be information about your official significant disproportionality determination, which you wouldn't be identified as significantly disproportionate for this year if you are here with us right now. And there will also be information about timeline compliance. So let's start looking at page 1 of the annual determination letter. So remember that determinations are made off of lag year data based on activities from 2022. And if you take a look at the letter on the first page down at the bottom, there's a section titled 2022 Annual Determination under IDEA Part B. This is where you will find the determination for your LEA. And the determination categories are meets requirements, needs assistance, needs intervention, or needs substantial intervention. So it depends on what kind of intervention or assistance you need and that the CDE will be providing. On the second page of the annual determination letter at the top, there is a description of CDE's monitoring system that gives a breakdown of how we're in different tiers with universal, targeted, and intensive, and just goes into a little bit of detail about what the process is for identifying. At the bottom of the letter on page 2, there's a box, a very important box, where you will be able to find your monitoring tier, so it should say targeted, and your level. So for example, you may be targeted level 1 or targeted level 2. On page 3 of the annual determination letter is a very important link. So please look near the top, maybe in the first sentence, first paragraph. You will have a link there. This link is not a different color. It's not bolded. So you do have to look for it. You will see the entire link typed out there, and it should be clickable. When you click on this link, it will take you to the data for your LEA that was used in your determination. So please make sure you check on this link. If you have any issues with this link, please let us know. We want to get that figured out as soon as possible to make sure you have the data that was used for your determination. On the final page of the annual determination letter, there are some important links listed here. So let's take a look. There is a section that says next steps. And there are some webinar dates and times listed there. However, all of these dates and times are updated. They will be updated on our website, and registration links for the CIM Step 1 trainings will be available to you, because we do want one place where you can go and register for these trainings. So that's going to be at the Compliance and Improvement Monitoring website, which is our CIM website for targeted levels 1 and 2. You will also see a targeted level 3 link there, so make sure you're clicking on the right page. And in that information, there's also information on how to contact your CDE consultant for any questions you may have or help that you need. All right, I would love to introduce Stephen Rogers from the data unit to discuss data review and selection criteria.
Good afternoon, everyone. So there were 4 areas of review that we used to determine your actual determination. We had a targeted data review, an intensive data review for school age, a preschool intensive data review, and then, of course, disproportionality and significant disproportionality. So let's go through those. There we are. Here's what the targeted data review sheet looks like. Basically, we took a whole series of performance indicators, looked at the rate for the LEA in each of those areas, and then determined whether they met the target or not. The number of targets not met ultimately determines what level of targeted review for performance measures the LEA ended up in. As you can see at the bottom, there are 4 targets not met, which landed them in level 2 review. Disproportionality data. Some of you, this should look pretty familiar. So this is specifically for indicator 9 and 10. We are looking for the letters OVR in the disproportionate line. As you can see, this one is already circled. That means that the LEA has exceeded the risk ratio maximum, which is 3.0, for that particular combination of race, ethnicity, and either disability or overall. In this case, African American students with disabilities had a risk ratio of 3.05, which exceeds the maximum threshold of 3.0. And this is the second page of the indicator 9 and 10 Dispro review. Here you will see African American students with other health impairments have a risk ratio of 4.20, which exceeds the maximum of 3.0, which gives them an OVR, which means this LEA is disproportionate for African American students with other health impairments. All right, so what does all this mean ultimately? So targeted level 1 means that you're not meeting 1 or 2 elements. You're not hitting the targets for 1 or 2 elements. Targeted level 2, 3 or more elements you're not meeting the target for, or you're in the first year of disproportionality. Targeted level 3, which isn't part of this group, but I'll go over it anyways. 2 or more years of disproportionality, bottom 11 to 20% of either school age or preschool intensive, or the bottom 10% of any FAPE and the LRE indicators on the school age or preschool intensive. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
So we have a few data-related questions that I just kind of was going to walk through with folks, and we'll have Stephen here to also answer the questions. So one question that folks were asking was, if an LEA is dispro and they have not met targets for indicators, are they only addressing those elements? That question went away. So the question, so the CIM is meant to be an inclusive process, meaning if you're disproportionate and you have other things, we want you to look at sort of all that data in step 1 to determine sort of what is the issue, and then to develop a root cause for them. We kind of think of this process a little bit like if you have lots of high interest credit cards, you don't make the minimum payment on all of them. We don't want to create 10 mini plans. What we want districts to do instead, and think about doing differently, is identifying the high leverage activity that's going to have the greatest impact on their the outcomes for kids, and how they can implement that one thing as opposed to 10 smaller things. So you're going to see that feeling a little bit differently. So if you have disproportionality and other things, we do want you to look at that data initially, but this process will kind of lead you down a path of identifying root causes and identifying one high leverage activity that can be implemented to address potentially multiple areas of concern. Okay, so if we were targeted 2 last year, does that mean we were targeted 2 this year? Does that mean we were targeted 1 last year? Probably not. If you were targeted level 2 last year, you were likely in disproportionality for the first time. And so that's kind of, it doesn't kind of graduate by years in that same exact way as last year. You were probably in your first year of disproportionality, and that's how you were in targeted level 2. So there wasn't, it doesn't work in that way. You kind of get into the levels this way. That's shown on the screen here. Can you explain what targeted level 3 for school age means? So I'll be happy to talk a little bit about that. I know most folks in this webinar are here for targeted levels 1 and 2, but just so folks are aware of what that means, what we do is we look at really key indicators. And what are those key indicators? Achievement, so scores on our statewide assessments, placement, that's least restrictive environment, and school climate, which is suspension, expulsion, and chronic absenteeism. We bring all of those indicators together and we look at how the district is doing on all of those indicators. And then we rank the districts based on their performance on those indicators, based on the best districts, so they're 100%, or the bottom 10% of districts. And so districts who are in that middle spot, so that 11 to 20%, so they're not quite intensive, they're not the bottom 10%, but they're getting closer, are in the targeted level 3 for school age. And that means we would like to work with you to address those issues before the district becomes intensive. So that is what that school age means. And we do have a document we'll be placing on the Padlet that describes that in a little bit more detail. What rubric was used to determine target level based on the unmet targets? So the rubric you can see here, not meeting 1 or 2 targets, and these are targets based on our annual performance report or the dashboard. So if we have, for example, for achievement, our statewide assessments, we use the dashboard methodology. For like least restrictive environment, we use our annual performance report, which is required in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. If you didn't meet 1 or 2 targets, then you would be in targeted level 1. And if you did not meet 3 or more, you would be in targeted level 2. What does targeted compliance only mean? So targeted compliance only means you've met all your performance targets and you're not disproportionate. You have timeline compliance issues, or you're not meeting all of the targets around indicator 13, which is the transition, post-school transition. So we would ask you all to work on that this year, but you will not be going to the CIM. So if your letter says targeted compliance only, I'm going to give you a gift, which means you can log off right now because you will not be participating in the CIM this year, and you can participate, and you will be working through your compliance only, meaning you'll be addressing those compliance elements. Okay. We are getting some questions about the timeline compliance, which is the IEPs and triennials. We aren't going to be providing lists of students at this time. I know some folks were asking about having lists of students. We will not be providing lists of students. What we want districts to do is to look within their local data. And if you see within your local data that your data is correct, and that no students are waiting on IEPs and no students are waiting on triennials, then you're good. You don't have to do anything else right now. We're going to review that data and see if there's any changes. We do know that there's been some challenges with CalPAD, so we're giving a little bit more space within that to allow districts to look at their individual data. We will provide support if they need that, and we will continue to review that, but we won't be providing student level data. I will say one thing, though, that we often find with LEAs is that they will say, all of our IEPs are up to date. I don't know why the CD continues to find these late IEPs. And when we dig into them, those students were never exited from the LEA. They're still showing as current, even though the districts believes that they have left or moved to another LEA. So I think that's something to be aware of, is that the discrepancy most often is because the student has left the LEA, but they were never exited from the system. So something to look at a little bit closely. So I think that's most of our data questions. If you get questions, then if you have questions, you think your data is wrong or you have other kinds of issues, we will continue to work with that. And you can contact Stephen with some of those questions about your LEA specific data.
Could I add one thing real quickly here? Just another note that we have emailed this PowerPoint to you. So if you're asking about some of these past slides or the slides coming up, they'll be included, including who your regional consultant is.
Yes, and so that's something that's really, thank you, Donna, I appreciate that. So if you registered in advance for this, somebody's laughing, I think that's very funny. If you registered in advance for this webinar, then you can, then you should have received the PowerPoint already. If you just registered right before you join, which is very common, that's fine. We will also be emailing the PowerPoint to all of the registered attendees that came today. So you will be getting a copy of this PowerPoint in the email as well as it being in the Padlet. Okay. I believe we're going on to Tamara, correct? Is that your
Yep.
time?
Thank you, Shiloh and Stephen. Appreciate your time. Here's the targeted monitoring tiered activity chart. Most of you in this group are targeted level 1 and 2. Your activities are completed independently with SELPA support. Just a quick overview of a timeline. We're in March and you got your annual determination letter and you're here at orientation with us. During April and May, we'll have trainings to help you fulfill the activities in the CIM process. June 30th, mark those calendars. The CIM step 1 is due. It's a little bit different for targeted levels 1 and 2. You'll be working with your SELPA, so there's nothing to turn into CDE. However, if you are an LEA with a previous CIM, those CIM progress reports are due in July, as Shiloh mentioned before. August 2nd, we're going to start the step 2 trainings on root cause analysis and prioritization. September 30th, step 2 is due. Again, you're going to want to check in with your SELPA, as nothing for targeted levels 1 and 2 is due to CDE. In October, we'll start the last part of the training on step 3. And then November 30th, again, those plans are due to CDE, but only for targeted levels 2. Targeted levels 1 and 2, you're going to work with your SELPA to see how they want that information from you. Any new questions, Shiloh, before we move on?
I accidentally jumped the gun on the questions. My apologies.
That's
Let
okay.
me see. Okay. I'm just looking through here. So we do have a couple questions. Oh, I'll put my spotlight back on. Oh, sorry. Ugh, I'm doing this incorrectly. Apologies on that. I have to make sure everyone is properly spotlit. Okay, I think everyone can be seen, so that works. So somebody asked, targeted for informational purposes only likely means that you were disproportionate. And so your disproportionality, so you should look at your disproportionality data because we're providing that information to you separately. Let me see. So someone asked, what if we are in the process of moving from one SELPA to another in terms of the monitoring? Donna, do you have an idea of how folks will handle that in the consultant?
Yes, they'll go with the new SELPA. Are they doing it this year or next year? I wonder. Well, if it's this year, they're definitely with the SELPA. Next year, stay with the SELPA that you're with presently, and where you go, then the other one, then you'll follow. You'll change when the SELPA changes.
So some folks are asking, okay, so we're in targeted level 1, so we don't need to do anything because nothing is due to CDE. No, that's not correct. So you still have to walk through the monitoring process, and we're going to walk through the steps here in a minute. But you will work with your SELPA, and your SELPA will make sure that the plan is due, and we will work with you as needed. And you will need to keep your information locally. That way, if we do need to review it, if we do have questions about it, we can ask you those questions. And they are, so you still need to complete each element. We are going to confirm that those areas were completed.
Can I just do one more thing? Somebody asked us to put the Padlet in the chart. If somebody asks me the question again, I can throw the link in. I
Sure.
didn't. Thanks. Somebody would please ask that question.
Yeah. So there are some questions about the indicators. So if you're not familiar with the annual performance report, that is where our indicators, if you're an LEA, you would have received a local annual performance report every year. And those are where those indicators come from. They're not made up. We don't just create them. They're from the U.S. Department of Education. And you have been receiving every year your local annual performance report. And there is a state level annual performance report. And we set targets as a state, which is approved by the state board. And those are the targets we use for LEAs. So if you have questions about how each indicator is created, we can provide you information. The SELPA improvement leads have created a beautiful guide that can help you walk through each indicator and what each indicator is and what that looks like. And we'll be happy to do that. The link to their data center is also on the Padlet, but we're happy, your consultant can provide more information that will allow you to walk through the indicators. So I think that's all the questions that we have now. I'll continue to work through them if we get more questions.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what's the overall goal of the CIM process? The overall goal of the CIM process is to help LEAs develop, implement, and monitor a plan that will improve outcomes for students with disabilities. The plan is a multi-year process, as Shiloh mentioned, with steps for development, implementation, and revision. Where can I find those CIM tools and instructions? All CIM tools and instructions are available at the Resources for Targeted Monitoring Padlet, which is linked here. So what should I do? What do I need to do to prepare for this process? Well, you've already done step 1, which is to review your annual determination letter. Next, you should think about and start collecting any data that might be helpful in the data drill down phase. You'll want to establish how you're going to collect and maintain the documentation you gather during this process. Also, if you plan on using the Seeds of Partnership for parent input, you need to create a primary user account. You can do this by clicking the link provided here.
Once you've completed all your preparations, you are ready to start CIM Step 1. CIM Step 1 is formally called the Gather and Inquire stage. This is where you will be looking at all of your data and drilling down to figure out what the issues are that you will be addressing during the CIM process. There are many different activities part of CIM Step 1, so let's take a look at those activities now. You will start with your CIM team development, organizing a team that will carry you through this entire process over the next few years. Once you have your team together, you will then start conducting your data drill down. And we have our friends from System Improvement Leads who will be leading us through that training, and we have some great tools for you. And so that's what the data drill down process will entail. Disproportionality reviews are only required for LEAs who were identified as disproportionate in the annual determination letter. So that is a review that will be done, and it includes those student record reviews in those areas of disproportionality. Parent input is another step that is included in the CIM Step 1 process, and this is required only for Level 1 and Level 2 LEAs who did not meet the target for Element 8. So as you're looking at that targeted data review chart, you can look for that indicator 8 and take a look. And if you did not meet the target, you are required for including parent input in your CIM plan. Then there will be a student record review in Step 12. And so all targeted Level 1 and 2 and 3 LEAs will be conducting a student record review in Step 12. The final activity of CIM Step 1 is called consolidation. This is where you're going to take everything you gathered, everything you learned, all of the data that you have, and you are going to consolidate it into a summary where you are identifying problems that you will move forward with into step 2 and begin addressing those problems. All right, so we're not going to leave you hanging out there. I'm not expecting all of you to write all that down now and go, okay, leave, let's go. We are providing trainings at every step of the way. So our next training after this orientation will be on Tuesday, April 4th. So I'll give you a moment just to grab your calendar so you can write this down. This CIM team development training will be a shorter training compared to this orientation. And in that training, we will be reviewing really who should be on your CIM team, right? Who are the required CIM team members that you want to have on your team? What are the responsibilities of the CIM team? What are you going to be doing? We also will provide you with a rubric to make sure that you have the correct members on your team and everybody that you need in order to be successful in this process. We also will be providing some resources for you that you may find helpful for your team. This training is offered for all SELPAs and targeted level LEAs if you would like to join us for the CIM team development training. And one last thing about this slide, where it says registration link, it is linked right there. And so you can click and register for this training. All right. After the team development training, we will be holding a data drill down training. I know there were some questions, some discrepancies about the date. And so it previously said April 11th. That date has been moved now. We will be holding our data drill down training on Tuesday, April 18th. And the training will be facilitated by System Improvement Leads, also known as SIL. And in that training, they will introduce to you their Improvement Data Center, which you may have seen before, you may have used before, and they have some tools to use so that you can walk through your data. This is offered for all SELPAs and all targeted level 1, 2, and 3 LEAs. Right. After the data drill down training, we will be offering a disproportionality review training. This is required for any LEA that has been identified as disproportionate. This training is going to be in a little bit different format. There won't be a live training for this. This will be a recorded training available on the resources for targeted monitoring Padlet. Now, all of our trainings will have recordings, and we will post those recordings on the Padlet. But this specific training will only have a recorded version that you can access. That's a self-guided walkthrough as you're doing your disproportionality review. This is for SELPAs and targeted level 2 LEAs who are identified as disproportionate in the annual determination letter. Okay, that takes us to our parent input training. The parent input training will be offered on Tuesday, April 25th. This parent input training is offered for all SELPAs and targeted level LEAs, but it's specifically important for our targeted level 1 and 2 LEAs, again, who did not meet that element 8 target. So you will refer back to that targeted data review chart that's linked in the data in your annual determination letter. You'll look to see if you've met target 8. If you haven't met, element 8, indicator 8, then you will want to join this training. And so what we're going to do in this training is provide you some options for gathering sufficient parent input while developing your CIM plan. And that will include the seeds of partnership that was mentioned earlier, which is just one of the options for gathering parent input. All right, the student record review training. The student record review training is tentatively scheduled for Monday, May 1st. This date may change, and CDE will make sure to update with the date change, and we will post it on our website and make sure that you're aware of this. The student record review will happen in our system known as Stepwell. So Stepwell is our system that, these sim activities, some of these sim activities will be completed in. For levels 1 and 2, you will be completing your student record review in Stepwell. And so this training will go into the details of how to get into Stepwell and how to conduct the student record review there. So this is important for SELPAs and all targeted level 1, 2, and 3 LEAs. The final training for Sim Step 1 will be the consolidation of Sim Step 1 findings training. This training will be offered on Wednesday, May 31st, and it's open for all SELPAs and targeted level LEAs. Targeted level 3 has just for your information, because I know most of you are targeted level 1 and 2, but just for your information, targeted level 3 is using Stepwell to submit some other activities that are not necessarily required to be submit, that 1 and 2 will be working with their SELPA on, okay? But this training is important, it's optional, but we encourage you to join us because we will be providing guidance on how to summarize what you learned during Step 1 through all those different activities. Okay, let's take a look at the CIM Step 1 due dates. Here's the good news. Targeted levels 1 and 2, there are only 2 items due, but please make sure you write down this due date, Friday, June 30th, 2023. Okay, so the first activity listed under targeted levels 1 and 2 is the disproportionality review, which will be due in the Special Education Compliance Monitoring System. We call this system SECMIS for short. Now, the disproportionality review is only required for disproportionate level 2 LEAs. So again, refer back to that annual determination letter. If you were identified as disproportionate, this review is due on June 30th. The second activity listed under targeted levels 1 and 2 is the student record review, which will be due in Stepwell. And all targeted level 1 and 2 LEAs will need to complete the student record review by June 30th.
That brings us to CIM Step 2, investigate. In this portion of the process, you'll be discovering and prioritizing root causes. CDE will be conducting a root cause analysis training on Tuesday, August 8th. This session will explain how to conduct a root cause analysis using the data from CIM Step 1 with a focus of identifying problem areas. All SELPAs and targeted levels 1, 2, and 3 should plan on attending. Prioritization of root cause training. While this isn't required for levels 1 and 2, you might find this training extremely helpful. On Tuesday, August 22nd, CDE will explain how to prioritize those root causes you previously identified. While you may have identified a multitude of issues in your root cause analysis, this training will help you prioritize them down to a maximum of 3 to focus on your CIM plan on. This training will be helpful for SELPAs and all targeted LEAs. So when is this Step 2 due? Levels 1 and 2, you're going to check in with your SELPA. They're going to set the due dates for these for you.
All right. After you complete CIM Step 2, that will move you into CIM Step 3, which is your plan. Step 3 includes developing your plan and establishing how you will implement this plan and how you will monitor this plan. We will be holding a plan development training on Tuesday, October 10th. The CDE will provide guidance on identifying high leverage strategies and supporting activities for the plan. And guidance will also be provided on how to include and identify those measurable outcomes. Those measurable outcomes will be important during the implementation and monitoring process. And this is open for all SELPAs and targeted level LEAs. The review and submission of the CIM plan will be on Thursday, November 30th. That's like our big date that we all have in mind, right? Thursday, November 30th is when this plan is due. So what does that mean for targeted levels 1 and 2 LEAs? That means that by November 30th, the plan has to be submitted to SELPA for review. So that is where you will submit your plan to.
In step 4, we'll cover how to do the report. We'll cover how to report the progress you're making and how to update your CIM plan if necessary. Shiloh reminded us of this earlier, but just to go over it once more. Those LEAs who were previously identified as significantly disproportionate, your CSACE report will be due to your new consultant on July 10th. Those LEAs who have previously prepared a CIM plan, your first progress report is due July 14th. The CDE will be hosting a training on how to complete and submit not only the progress report form itself, but the documentation that may be needed along with it. This training has not yet been scheduled, but we'll send out the date as soon as we have it. It will be open for SELPAs and targeted levels 1, 2, and 3. Updating the CIM plan. The CIM plan cycle will continue through 2025. So what does this mean for the future? Each year, you will still receive an annual determination letter. You're going to review the local data to determine how you've progressed during the last year. LEAs are going to want to update your CIM plan based on the updated information. CDE will be collecting progress reports from Targeted 3 so we can share and compliment you on the progress I'm sure you will make.
I know that this has been a lot of information today. Definitely, we're going through this process that we will be working on over the next 8 months. It's very involved. There's many steps. And so I know there's tons of questions coming up and being answered, and I'm sure there will be more questions as we move along throughout the next year and even beyond. So where can you get help? Where can you get technical assistance? CDE consultants will be checking in monthly with those targeted level 3 LEAs because they're on a more required, they require assistance. That's the level that they're working on. And so, but does that mean we're not helping targeted level 1 and 2 LEAs? No, that means that it is, if you find that you need help at any time, if you need assistance, if you need to meet or ask questions, please don't hesitate to contact your regional CDE FMTA consultant. In just a moment, I will be showing you a map of the different regions of California. And so we can discuss how to figure out who your consultant is, who you can contact for help. Additionally, we will have that resources for targeted monitoring Padlet available to you that's linked here. And I know it's been linked a few times in the Q&A. And so resources are already on that Padlet. I'm sure that more resources will be added as we move along through the year. And so bookmark that link and check it as we move through this process. Okay, next steps. So now that we've given you all of this information, let's just focus on taking the next few steps over the next couple of days, next week. So you want to start preparing for the CIM process. And in order to do that, in order to prepare, we would refer you back to that CIM preparation slide way earlier in the PowerPoint. Just to refresh your memory, some of the things that you might be doing would be thinking of who you want on your team. Maybe you you did a CSACE plan last year and you already have a team. Or maybe you did a plan last year, a CIM plan last year, and you already have a team. or maybe you have another team that you could pull people. Perhaps you don't have any team at all. That's okay. You can start building a brand new team. That is up to your discretion. And you want to start collecting that data. Okay. So again, contact your consultant. If you have any questions, we can help you get started on this process. And I would say if there's one thing you want to do right away is register for the CIM team development training so that you can get started on building that team should you need that support. And in order to register for those trainings, they are available on the targeted, there's two different websites. There's the targeted level 1 and 2 monitoring and the targeted level 3. So we would direct you to the targeted level 1 and 2 monitoring webpage linked here. Okay, here is the CDE FMTA consultant map and contact information by region. There are 11 different regions in California. We have the consultants, the administrators, and their emails over here to the side of the map. These are the current assignments. However, our consultant assignments are still being cemented. And so if there are any changes, we will let you know. And make sure we repost this. We do have a website that posts this information as well. And I'm going to leave this up here while we give some time to answer some more questions.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I really appreciate it, and the whole team. They've been doing such a good job on this process. So I get some questions in, and I want to walk through them, and we'll sort of go back and forth between the team and myself to answer the questions, and maybe we'll even pop Stephen back in here if we have a data-related question. But will LEAs with a current CSACE plan be transitioned to a CIM eventually? If yes, do you have an estimated year for when that will occur? So if you are on a current CSACE plan, like what is a CSACE plan? That means you were significantly disproportionate in last year, and now you have a plan to address that. You're going to continue to work on that. And so you are basically in year 1 of that process. And remember, you have to expend those funds over 27 months. What we strongly suggest is that you also look at your current data to determine, is there anything else in our LEA that's happening that we need to address? Maybe expand our CSACE plan a little bit, maybe make some addendums to it. But at this point, you do not need to start over with the CIM. You will be continuing through the CSACE process for at least 1 more year, probably to expend the funds fully for those 27 months. How will prong 2 be handled for the areas of compliance? So I'm guessing folks are asking about the timeline compliance. So the prong 2 right now, we're going to be looking until after end of year. So what we're telling everyone to do is to look at their local data, make sure that their data is accurately reflected in their system. You'll be uploading the data to CalPads through end of year. We're going to be reviewing that data, and that's when the prong 2 process will happen. Now, what we do look at every year in February is for that initial, after the fall 1, for those initial data determinations to see which districts are falling into one of those 3 categories for additional assistance. But we aren't going to be looking at individual corrections that are being sent to us via a different portal outside of CalPAD. So we want districts to look inside their data, make sure it's accurate. We'll look at it again after end of year. If you're unfamiliar with when that timeline is, that's around August. And then we'll look at it again to see which districts are still falling into the highest level of need for those categories. So if an LEA is already completing a student file review via small monitoring, will they have to do a separate student file review for DISPRO? So if you are a small LEA and now you find yourself in the first year of disproportionality and you've been selected for CIM, your small monitoring will be suspended and you will start the CIM process. You're sort of jump starting the process that we would have gone through that data collection, and you'll be walking through the CIM. So you'll be walking through the CIM with all the other LEAs looking at the disproportionality because you haven't been looking at that in the past. But you're able to use the information that you've already collected to help inform your CIM plan. So can you repeat what data drill down is? So remember that step 1 is asking what is the problem. And a big portion of that is looking at your data. Now, we've provided you some data. but we want LEAs to look more closely at different ways that their data can be disaggregated. And we've partnered with our SELPA improvement leads, and they've built a beautiful data center to help you look at those data pieces and look at them by school site, by gender, by race, ethnicity, by age, by grade, to determine what is happening in the LEA that is causing some of these poorer outcomes. Can we pinpoint a specific set of students that is impacted, a specific set of school sites, and then that way we can target and understand why that's happening, and we can build out high leverage activities that are going to be responsive to those needs. If you're unable to attend a training, I understand spring break's coming. We're all ready for spring break. And so I know that my young boys are very ready for spring break. And unfortunately, because of the timelines, we didn't want to push out the trainings too far. So if you're on spring break during any of our training dates, we will ensure that within that week, we post the videos of those trainings up on the Padlet and on our website so that you can have access to them upon your return. So they will be recorded and they will be accessible for you. And we are going to provide the registration links on the Padlet and on the website today. So you will have access to those links today. So that's how you will register for those trainings. You'll register them through the links that we'll provide on our website and on the Padlet. So you will have access to them. And those should be up there today. Some folks were asking about what is element 8? What is indicator 8? Indicator 8 is the parent input indicator. So that is the indicator that looks at whether or not parents had input into their development of their child's IEP. And there is a target set for that. And if your LEA did not meet that target, then we're going to want you to seek out additional parent input as part of the development of your CIM plan. And so you should have that information in your letter. It would be in all the indicators, and you could see indicator 8, and we'll tell you whether or not you met that target. Okay. Oh, our progresses reports. Making a change here. Our progress reports required for targeted level 2. So Tamara or Donna, do you want to talk a little bit about the progress reporting for LEAs who are in targeted level 2, who were targeted level 2 last year and are now continuing into targeted level 2?
So Tamara, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. So if you were targeted level 2 last year and created a CIM plan, you're going to look at the data that you received this year and look at your CIM plan. If it makes sense to go ahead and keep working on that same CIM plan, then you're going to do some small revisions probably and go ahead and keep going with that CIM plan, and then you would do the progress report. Should you choose to start a whole new CIM plan, like, oh, that the data from last year doesn't really match up with the activities that we had, and so we'd rather just start all over and refocus. I've had a couple of LEAs already reach out to me saying that is what they would like to do. Then you would start the whole process over again, and there wouldn't be anything to report in that progress reporting period.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so trying to go up to my questions here. How do SELPAs notify CDE that the targeted 1s and 2s have been submitted or have completed? It's not really that they've been submitted, it's that they've been completed. What we're asking SELPAs to assure is that the LEAs have walked through the steps or walked through them independently, and that they have completed the steps, and so that they have a plan locally that they're going to be working on. And that will come through a set of assurances that will happen in November. So that's how they will provide that to us at that time.
Just before, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions about the dates on the website, and Tammy's going to change those dates as soon as she gets done with this training. But it is April 18th And then May 1st is just a hold that date. It was May 4th, but it was changed to May 1st, and it's hold that date, okay? We aren't sure we're going to be having that training at that time.
We're trying to really accommodate a lot of the spring break issues and give folks some breathing room. And
SELPA meetings.
the SELPA meeting, we had a request to change the training to ensure that SELPA could attend. So we're kind of working on accommodating a lot of things. So we really appreciate your patience as we move through this. So why are district affiliated charters required to go through this process? That's an excellent question. The reason that they're required to go through this process is that our accountability system through the local control funding formula made every charter, regardless of their affiliation, their own LEA. And because of that, their data is removed from the dashboard and they have their own dashboard. And so since 2019, they've been provided their own annual determination letter and have been monitored separately. And that's just to align with the larger system. So that's why they are required to go through this process. Where can we find definitions of each of the indicators? So each indicator we can identify. The SELPA improvement leads have created a really beautiful document that walks through each indicator, and we're going to be providing you some selection documents up on the Padlet so you all can learn a little bit more about how the selection was made. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, Stephen.
No, I do not.
Okay, good. Okay. So we're getting a couple more questions that's small, so I'm just going to kind of repeat that. So the district's going through this small review. So they've gone through the small review, and now they've been identified for disproportionality. We don't have any control about how an LEA is selected for disproportionality. That is dictated to us by the U.S. Department of Education. And so smalls are part of that selection, unfortunately. And I understand the challenges associated with that because the way the calculation is made is very challenging for smalls, but it is what we must do. And so if you are selected, if you received a letter that you were selected for monitoring for this year for disproportionality, the rest of your smalls monitoring activities have been suspended. So you don't have to complete the rest of them, and you will start on the disproportionality CIM process. And then you have completed the work for the 3 years. So you will not be selected again for the smalls monitoring. You won't be eligible for selection for the smalls monitoring until for another 3 years. So just so you know, but disproportionality, unfortunately, is an every year thing. And I do understand the challenges with that. We have been unsuccessful in lobbying the U.S. Department of Education to make those accommodations for small LEAs. Okay. So I want to be sure that I understand the information you shared about CSACE to CIM. If a district is in CSACE for 2022 and now in targeted for 2023, that is a CIM, they do not need to start over a CIM. That is correct. You do not need to start a CIM. You will be now into what we would know as step 4, implementation. And so you'll work with your consultant to implement that plan and provide us progress reports. Okay. So is the dashboard performance data included in your RSIM? Yes, it is. So, so we have in the dashboard, there's 3 indicators that are overlapping. That's the achievement indicator, that's the statewide assessments indicator, the graduation indicator, and the suspension indicator. So in those cases where they are overlapping, we will use the dashboard for consistency. Now in your notifications, you may have had something where it said the suspension was very low and you didn't meet the target. We were working to be consistent there. That really means you were very low, you weren't meeting the target. So you were still selected for the suspension indicator. Trying to go through these. I think I talked about small LEAs. Just talked about the district. So our district was found to be significantly disproportionate. one of their charters is targeted level 2. Would they still do targeted level 2 activities? And I think, Donna, the answer is yes, they would, as we described, correct? Great. Yes. Some folks are asking some really individualized questions about their data. You know, we can't answer like individual, like we have 5 students in preschool and their LRE is this. Can you confirm that? Like, so we can't answer those questions today, but Stephen Rogers is available. If you email him, he can answer those questions. His email is very simple. It's srogers@cde.ca.gov. Again, that's cde.ca.gov. So I can't answer individual questions today. So this data does not include ISPs, correct? ISPs are individualized service plans. So those are students that attend private schools. And you're correct. When we make the calculation of data, it does not include students who are on ISPs, individualized service plans. So the link to the data drill down training that will be available, the link to the registration will be available in the Padlet and in the website today. So as soon as Tammy is done here, she's going to rush over and work on that website. We will work to get that updated today.
Plus, I think we have it on the PowerPoint, don't we, Tammy? Did we put it on? Yeah, so on the PowerPoint you're receiving today, too.
So we get that one.
Shiloh?
Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
So a number of people have asked about indicator 6C, home. So according to the federal definition, which is the definition we're required to use, it is defined as receiving special education and related services in the home. There is your definition.
Yeah. So if you identified a student in preschool who has received their services at home, then that's what that indicator is for. And someone was asking, is there a definition of the selection elements? We are going to provide some documentation up on our Padlet very shortly. We wanted to kind of walk through it today a little bit so that it wouldn't feel confusing, and then we'll provide that documentation up there for you to follow up with. I talked about live LEAs.
Did you mention the SIGDIS question? District is SIGDIS and one of their charters is targeted level 2?
Yes. So they would still be doing their targeted level 2 activities. And that's only the reason for that is because the district, the charter school is its own LEA for the purposes of our accountability system under the local control accountability formula, local control funding formula. Okay, so how are preschool students classified when they do not receive preschool other than speech only? So speech only students, it's not about where they receive, it's about how they are identified within your system. So if you identify them as receiving their speech services at home, then that would be part of indicator 6C. So it's different from 5C. I do see some people in the chat making, saying, well, 6C and 5C are the same. It's not about separate schools and separate placements. This is about where the student is receiving the majority of their special education and related services. And so it's about, does the child receive their related services in the home? Whereas 5C is our indicator that identifies whether school-age children, so children who are ages 6 through 22, attend a school that's separate. It's a little bit different. Oh. Okay. Link to the Padlet. So the Padlet will be in the PowerPoint. We can definitely put that link up here. I've answered those questions. Okay. From where is the preschool discipline data pulled? That data is pulled from the discipline files that are sent to us. But keep in mind that the U.S. Department of Education, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, will define children in preschool as ages 3 to 5. We're just going through questions. So if you've had all your questions answered and you feel confident that you can move forward with what you have, you do not have to stay on anymore. I know we're taking some valuable time from you all. But if you do have additional questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will continue to work through those questions. So to answer, I believe, Stephen, to answer this question, if a preschool student receives speech at home and does not attend preschool, we are only meeting target if less than 3.5% of preschoolers receive services in the home. That is correct. Stephen, am I?
Yes, it gets extraordinarily tricky whenever we talk about speech services. So that's why I punted it over to you, because speech-only services represent difficulty in terms of reporting. But yes,
so again,
yes,
this is about where the student receives the services. So if their code is receiving their services at home, not in a service provider location, right? So if you identify that they come to the district office 3 times a week for speech, that is not these students for home. So that should be pretty clear. Like those students are actually included in indicator 6B. Is there a link of all the available trainings on the CDU website? Yes, on the CIM website, we will have a link to those trainings by the end of the day. Okay.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Just so you know, any questions related to how do we code a student who I'm referring to local CalPads and then to CalPads help desk, because that's not appropriate for what it is we're doing here.
Yes. If you have data entry questions, we can definitely, our CalPads folks can answer those questions. A link to the website in the page. I can get this here.
Which website?
Oh, ooh, I just sent that Padlet link. I'm sorry. But it's on our CDE website also. So I'm going to answer this question here, which is the data drill down required section of the PAT has a document called How to Access the Drill Down Center and instructs you how to upload CalPads files. Is that what we need to complete step 1? It doesn't say what file needs consists based on the indicators we're out of compliance with. So there's going to be a training on April 18th. That you can go to that's going to walk through all of that and it's going to help you identify those. So I know everyone's getting really excited and ready to go, but in this case, we probably want to wait until that time if you're unsure of how to use the data center. I mean, there's no harm in sort of walking through it and playing around with it, but if you really want to wait until that training, that's probably going to be most helpful. I will also say, though, one of the biggest things we want folks to really be thinking about right now is what is their team going to look like? And this is the team that's going to develop your root cause analysis, that's going to develop your plans. What is that team going to look like where it's going to be most impactful and effective?
So let me try to answer the question around students with mod severe being counted as dropouts. So they don't code mod severe students, I'm assuming, so this COC not graduating with a diploma with a cohort. But should we be exiting those students with the CalPads code that does not count as a dropout, right? Correct. So my gut instinct, and boss, you can correct me here, is to exit them with the code that best matches the reason they're exiting. It makes no difference whether it has an effect on your dropout or graduation rates at all. Give them the best exit code that matches the reason they're exiting. I know that sounds a little, I don't know, maybe obnoxious, but that's what data reporting is.
Yeah. And
if data integrity is not good, then data results are not good. So whatever reason they're actually exiting should be the code that they get.
Yeah, but I just, for clarification, the students who are counted in this dropout rate are not students who receive a certificate of completion. they're not counted in the graduation rate, which is a 4-year cohort rate, but they are counted in they're not part of the dropout rate if you put them in as having a certificate of completion. What code will CalPADS will not count those mod spheres? So I think I clarified. I think I just clarified that. So I think we're in good shape there. Where are the forms to turn? I'm ready to submit our root cause analysis and corrective strategic plan. Unfortunately, you haven't gone through our steps yet. So we need to go through the steps to make sure that you are working through that. So we have to so there's 2 things that you're going to be required to do as targeted level 1 or 2. You have to complete the data drill down, which tells us you've looked at your current data and your strategic plan takes into account the individual issues and data that you've identified. And number 2, you have completed the compliance review. And that compliance review will also illuminate practices and policies that might exist at your LEA that are contributing to outcomes for students with disabilities. So we need to complete those pieces before we get into the root cause analysis. Now, if you feel like we've done all that, then you should contact your FMTA consultant and they can walk through that. But we really need folks to complete that process. I understand districts are going through the differentiated assistance process. This feels a little bit off because that relaunched this year and we have this, and we're happy to kind of walk through that. But we need districts to also complete, what we've found is that a lot of times those root cause analyses process don't take into account policies, practices, and procedures that are contributing to student success gaps, and also looking at disaggregated data based on the elements that are specific. Meaning if the students are not doing well in achievement, have we looked at LRE practices or data that might be contributing to that? So just, I would reach out to your FMTA consultant to kind of walk through that process a little bit more. We have no open questions in the Q&A. So we'll give folks a few minutes if they have some more questions. One popped up. So, but we'll stay as long as we want. But if you felt you've gotten everything you needed from today, you're welcome to log off. So somebody was asking, when will we receive the specific student names? So those specific student names exist within your data system. So we're asking you to look there. And then if we still continue to find an issue after the end of year, then we'll reach out to those LEAs directly. So can you restate the information about the timeline? Is that the timeline for our process, the timeline issues? So we want LEAs to look at their data systems now, and then we'll review it after the CalPADS end of year to see if there's been updates. We'll stay on a few more minutes. We don't have any current questions in the chat, but we'll stay on a few more minutes. Got a few more questions. So where do we access the Stepwell website? When you attend that policies, practices, and procedures training later on this month, they will provide you that information on how to access, and we will provide you individualized access information. So so somebody was asking, where do we find, I love when folks in the Q&A will answer questions for each other. Where do we find the definitions for each indicator? For example, 6B. And then somebody went and said, wait, there's a document for that. And there is a document for that. And I'm going to go ahead and provide you a link to our improvement data center that will have that forms on it. Which slide refers to the timeline process step by step from now, this summer through November? We don't have that on a slide. What we want LEAs to do is we want them to look at their data, determine if they have late IEPs, and we'll review the data after end of year for CalPADS. I don't see any questions for the questions in the chat. Do we have any sort of closing information that we wanted to add, Donna, Tamara, or Jacqueline?
There's one more question that popped up, Shiloh.
Yes.
And when will the training links be live?
Tamara, when are the training links going to be live?
So we just have to go through a little bit of transcribing, right, Shiloh? We have to make sure that the transcription.
So I think they're asking about the training registration links, and we're going to try and get those.
I have them ready to go. We just need to get them uploaded.
Yep, we're going to get those ready for you all today.
I see a few people raising your hand. Just go ahead and just a reminder, just to go ahead and type right into the Q&A, because we're unable to unmute you.
Okay. The data will be pulled. We've said this a couple of times. So the data will be pulled for late IEPs again to review after end of year for CalPADS. Someone is asking again about some of the late IEP questions, which is if there's a delay code when an IEP is not held on time. Yeah, that's not what we're looking at. I mean, we look at those delay codes and we take them into account, but they're not used forever. So we will use, it's not a negative mark, like we don't check you off like you're being naughty. We just look and make sure that those aren't used in perpetuity. For example, if there's a delay in the assessment because the student needed a vision screening, that cannot be used for 2 years. So we look at things like that.
Looks like we're done with questions.
I think that's all the questions that are coming through. Hooray.
175 questions and 200 from earlier today, so.
We'll have a lot to put together. Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you all for coming and attending this time. Thank you so much to our interpreters for their energy and time. We appreciate that, and we will see you all soon.
Bye.